Hey, Sit and Spin fans, hello, and welcome back to part 2 of our continued coverage of the top rock and roll / music movies of all time. In this segment, we're going to cover some of my personal favorite top movies, even though I agree with most of the top 10. 10, not enough for me. I need more. So we're going to go through some of those right now, and then we'll do one further segment where I cover some other great rock and roll flicks that maybe you never saw. I'll try to blaze through this as quickly as I can, so bear with me if I make mistakes. First up, we have Empire Records, which along with High Fidelity and Almost Famous is another music movie that kind of defines a good portion of my life. It tells the story of a group of young folks working at a place called Empire Records, and just happens to feature a manager named Joe. Great flick with a young up-and-coming cast of featuring young talent like back then at least, Liv Tyler, Renee Zellweger, Ethan Embry, Robin Tunney, Rory Cochrane. Movie list goes on and on and on. Basically, great soundtrack, and this is the special remix edition of the movie, which features about 20 or 30 minutes of deleted scenes that show a completely different storyline for some of the characters. Great flick, check it out. Another movie that got a lot of votes, but just not quite enough to make the top 10, and a stone cold classic from my generation, Eddie and the Cruisers, based on the original novel by P.F. Klug. That's right, this is actually based on a book. Great flick. This version comes with Eddie and the Cruisers 2. Somewhat worthy sequel, not quite as good as the original, but also decent flick. The storyline from that movie kind of uses leftover elements from the original book, not used in the original movie. It tells a finishing story of Eddie and the Cruisers. The original, though, stone cold classic that jump-started the career of John Cafferty and the Beaver Brown Band, who did all the soundtrack for this movie. Both movies decent, but the first, a must-see. If you've never seen it, why? We're going to go across the pond to Britain now, and the story of Pirate Radio. Another movie I'm surprised more people didn't get a vote for. Got a couple, but not enough. And as it's known over there, The Boat That Rocked. Different film, because this basically tells the story of the pirate radio stations operating in Great Britain back in the early 60s, because the BBC wouldn't let people have their rock and roll, so these pirate radio stations would broadcast miles offshore where they couldn't be attacked and give their kids their rock and roll. Really funny movie. A lot of good talent in this. Check it out if you've never seen it. Sticking with the British theme, we're going to go with the rock and roll fable Velvet Goldmine. This is a movie that kind of tells the story of the early 70s glam movement in Britain. It stars Jonathan Rhys-Meyers, Ewan McGregor, and Christian Bale. Bale plays a reporter looking to find out whatever happened to Meyers' character, who's a David Bowie analog, and also Ewan McGregor's character, who is an Iggy Pop type analog. The soundtrack features music made up of bands consisting of members of Radiohead, REM, Sonic Youth, Placebo, all these other bands, some of them covering classic songs from back in the day. Really, really great movie. If you're a Christian Bale fan, you should definitely check this flick out. Really, really good. Sticking with the British theme for one further film, another little comedy this time called Still Crazy. This tells the story of a Deep Purple type band called Strange Fruit, who gets asked to reunite to play a British music festival and or European music festival. Actually, it doesn't matter really. But the hijinks that ensue trying to get the band back together and get everybody back up to speed to play the festival stars Stephen Rea, Billy Connolly, Bill Nighy, and a bunch of other excellent British talent. If you've never seen this flick, really good film. And again, as with most of these, excellent soundtrack. Good luck trying to find this one. You probably will be able to find it on YouTube if you can find it at all. I spent years trying to track down this beat-up video copy, but it was well worth it because this is one of my all-time favorite movies. Little scene film from 1985 called Thunder Alley. It tells the story of Richie, who played by Roger Wilson, who actually does a lot of the guitar parts in this movie. The rest were played by a guy named Scott Shelley. And basically tells the story of him and his friends getting their rock band together in the Phoenix, Arizona scene. Also stars the young Leif Garrett and one of the first movie roles for Clancy Brown, who plays the badass road manager with a heart of gold, just trying to make magic happen. I wish somebody would get off their butts. MGM, who put this movie out originally, and finally released this on DVD, if not Blu-ray. And shame there was never a soundtrack for this movie, because it's a great flick. If you've never seen it, like YouTube it, you can find it. I'm pretty sure it's there, but really good flick, especially if you're a fan of like 80s music scene. Another movie that's a biop. The Runaways, the story of the seminal female rock band that consisted of Joan Jett, Sherry Curry, Lita Ford. All those guys got their start out of this band. This was a really good biopic from a couple years ago. Excellent flick. And sticking with Joan Jett, her first starring role in the movie Light of Day, which was a starring role for her and also featured Michael J. Fox, and who played her younger brother in the movie. Michael McKean is also a member of the band. For an first acting role, Joan Jett, pretty damn good in this flick. And of course, the title song was written by the boss, Bruce Springsteen. And again, somebody needs to put this thing out on DVD. Another more recent movie I'm surprised didn't get more votes, but really good flick, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. This is the story of Scott Pilgrim based on the comic book of the same name. Scott is the bass player in the band Sex Bob-omb. Try saying that 3 times fast. And the movie features elements of like comic books, video games, and rock and roll. And what's wrong with that? Another movie that's sort of a analog biopic type pick, Grace of My Heart. This tells the story of the Brill Building era sound. They don't call it that then, but basically Ileana Douglas plays a Carole King analog, and it features kind of tells that story of like when songwriters were more important than the actual musicians. Matt Dillon plays a Brian Wilson type character, and there's also members of Red Cross and Dinosaur Jr. in this flick. And the soundtrack featured pairings of classic people from that time with more modern artists. So you get like Burt Bacharach and Elvis Costello teaming up to write songs. Really, really good film. If you've never seen it, check it out. Another all-time favorite, because I am a Monkees fan. The Monkees had a fever dream trip of a movie, if ever there was one. Screenplay written with producers Bob Rafelson, Bert Schneider, and a young Jack Nicholson. That's right, Jack Nicholson. He wrote the script with the members of the band. They all got together on one stoned-out weekend and came up with this little flick, which pretty much totally dismantles the mythos of the Monkees, but well worth checking out if you've never seen it, especially if you're a Monkees fan of any kind. And speaking of fanatic fans, there are a few bands that have as many fanatic fans as Kiss. And this movie tells the story of a group of them trying to get to see their favorite band in the world play a concert, and all the crazy hijinks that ensue with them trying to do that. And one last one for my favorite music movies of all time. Not a rock and roll movie, but definitely a music movie. And in a way, you could say this guy was one of the original rock and roll rebels. Amadeus. Great flick. Lots of talented people in this movie. And if you've never seen it, do yourself a favor and check it out, because it is an awesome movie. That's it for this segment. I've already run way longer than I wanted to, but check out segment 3 for some more rock and roll movies you may not have seen that you should check out. See you later.